In her life, she, quote, did everything right in the face of everything wrong. She walked 11 and a half miles with a baby and a bundle under her arm from enslavement to what she hoped would be freedom.
Hello, welcome back to SUNY New Paltz.
Hey, glad to be here. I'm a New Paltz alum. I was here from 1963 to 1967. I was asked to come back and do a distinguished speaker lecture, which I did. I graduated New Paltz as a theater major, which ended up serving me well because I've had several of those first Black experiences in education that have shifted what I came to do. I was living off campus on the route that leads to Kingston. A man driving a state car saw me running down from campus and headed to my housing. As I was coming across town, this man pulled over next to me in a state car, and in in our orientation, we'd been told that when you see a state car, it's like having a police car. You'll be fine, and you can always flag one down because it's either a faculty member or somebody like that. And so he said to me, "What are you doing out here so late?" And I told him what had happened. He said, "Get in. It's too late. It's rainy. I will take you home." He did drive the shortcut down to the house. And as I was thanking him and getting out of the car to go into my house, he literally reached under my raincoat and through my legs and dragged me back into the car and sped off towards the hills. I got away from him by stabbing him with my umbrella and ran back to my house. I told them what had happened. The house mother immediately called the police. The police arrived. They were anxious to take my information about what had happened, and they kept trying to get me to say that it was an apple picker who did this, meaning either a Latino or a Black person, a migrant worker. All these years later, I can still see him. He was driving a state car. I gave a description of him. He was a white man with wavy, dark, brownish black hair. His hair slicked back. He had on a gray suit, like a shark skin type suit. His briefcase was in the back. I went through this whole thing. And the police kept wanting me to say it was an apple picker, and I kept saying no. And one of them finally slammed down his notebook and literally said, "Why, you little whore. If you think I'm going to ruin a good man's life for a whore like you, you're crazy." And with that, the two of them got up and walked away. I was only 17 when it happened. I was terrified to go back out into the street after that had happened. And there was no support for what had happened to me, none. So when I did ultimately graduate, it was 40 years. I never came back to school. I never came back to town. I never came back for any reason through New Paltz. What brought me back was the story of Sojourner Truth. sometimes in the evening after class, I would just go down to the river and sit there and kind of look over to the mountains and just kind of detox for myself. But what I didn't know until 40 years later was that the place where I was going was one of the places that she would go to have her talks with God. I was literally walking in her footsteps and I did not know it. Sojourner Truth is to me a barometer. I was here in school for 4 years and never knew that this is where she had lived, this area, that this is where she had come. Indeed, when I was a student here from 1963 to 1967, no one talked about slavery in the North. It was everyone acted as though that was just the South, and it wasn't. Not only was it also the North, but the North had the, even after it let go the agricultural part of enslavement, it had the industrialized complicity. Who was making the whips, chains, lashes, and guns that allowed enslavement to be perpetrated? The instruments of torture were being made in the North. Here we are in New Paltz. We're at a library named for this woman who was forced to not learn to read or write. She said that she could not read books, but she could read people. At a point where she realized that she wanted to leave slavery behind, she actually made a deal with her slave owner. And it's time for us to use the right terms. These are human traffickers that we're talking about. He, quote, promised her that if she worked really hard, that he would let her go a year early in terms of the actual date of emancipation for New York State. When that time came, surprise, he reneged. And she decided that she would do a huge amount of work for him still, and then she would not run from slavery, she would walk. Kingston Courthouse is really important because when she walked away from slavery, she was only able to bring her baby with her, her youngest child. The three older were left behind with their father. What that same owner who denied her what was promised, that for her working so hard and diligently she would be freed a year early, he also sold her son away. You're about to show me something that I have gone decades wanting to see. So what do we have here?
My name is Taylor Book. I'm the archivist for the Ulster County Clerk's Office. And what we have here is the original writ, the recognizance for Solomon Gidney. Isabella Bumfree, Sojourner Truth, when her son was sold into slavery into Alabama, this is the gentleman that allegedly sold him into slavery, which broke New York state law. So what this writ says, it's essentially calling him into court to appear in front of the judge and explain himself.
So essentially, this is like someone going to court today and having to post bond to prove that they will show up for the court case or on the date that they're supposed to, or do whatever the court has said they must do. So this is really a property document still. Even though abolition had become the law of the land, it's still a property matter, the life of her child.
Well, the building we're standing in front of is the Ulster County Courthouse. This building itself, it's had several additions put on it, but what we're facing now was completed in 1818.
So we are here doing a piece on Sojourner Truth. That means that this is what she saw?
Absolutely. These would have been the steps that she went up, and this would have been the doorway that she walked through.
Were those the original steps likely?
I believe that they were. Sojourner Truth was born in Hurley, which is part of Ulster County, New York. She lived in various places, in various households during her life, and she ended up at the residence of John Dumont. Now, we have here in Ulster County, you can actually walk in her footsteps. It's called the Sojourner Truth's Walk to Freedom.
She takes on a whole other significance to me on that level as well. To think that we were so near and yet so far. I mean, of course, I was not alive at the point that she is alive. I think she dies in the late 1880s. But at the same point, sometimes we think of these things as being so far and distant in the past. It is not as long ago as we think it is. And that's some of the reason why we're still having the troubles that we're having in this country today. We have never confronted that past. We have never gotten past that past. We have never acknowledged how close it is to us, how much it impacts our present each and every day. And so to actually go from all the denial, the fact that she wasn't even acknowledged, given her historic position, none of that, all of that was completely wiped out. 200 years ago, they said these people don't matter. Right now, what we're saying is that we don't have to continue to say they don't matter. Corinne Nyquist was so gracious, and she took me on this walking tour. We actually drove of Sojourner Truth's New York. Nyquist was so gracious that I felt that I should come back to the area, that I had unfinished business here in the area, that I had left in a way perhaps I should not have. So yes, I want my pain to be foreign, to be irrelevant, but I know it is not. Whether Black or Latino, Chicano or Middle Eastern, Muslim, LGBTQ, or whatever this earth gave you to be, that people with problems and privileges want to harass you for? In this world, yes, all things are one. Let no one contaminate your mind. In this world too, said my granduncle, delivering and rescuing me with the mantra I now give you, know when to leave the plantation. This little light of mine, yes, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, yes. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.